Tua Tagovailoa speaks to the media, an injury update for the Dolphins offensive line, and more here today on this Friday episode of Locked on Dolphins.
You are Locked on Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked on Dolphins. It is your team every day. Here on the Locked on Network, I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked on Dolphins, co-host of Locked on NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami, and the NFL draft lead for the 33rd team. Shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it. Here on the Locked on Network, today's episode of Locked on Dolphins is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions do apply. Couple different directions we're going to go on a Friday. We obviously have the Monday show to put the final recap on prepping for Dolphins-Rams Monday Night Football. So we get a little extra wiggle room. And Tua Tagovailoa had his weekly press availability yesterday, and I thought he gave some interesting answers when talking about Tyreek Hill and his impact with and without the football this season. Obviously, the Dolphins offense the past 2 weeks looking more like the unit that we were expecting them to look like all season long after a herky-jerky start against Jacksonville and Buffalo, and then Tua goes down, and you don't really know what you have offensively, and 27 points in each of the last two games is a fair showing for an offense that was amongst the most potent from a points perspective all year last year. So Tua Tagovailoa was asked explicitly about what does a guy like Tyreek do? I believe this question came from Marcel Louis-Jacques on the press conference yesterday about how Tyreek is positively impacting the game when he's not getting all of the volume of passing that he's been getting the last 2 years here in Miami. And Tua said what's cool when you turn on the film is you watch 10 and 17 is what they do with the blocking game or the run game and how they do their blocking. They allow our runners some pretty big holes outside of the offensive linemen, but those guys are getting to the second level quick, and I think it really translates to the way they play the pass game as well. And that was something that we've been trying to find for those guys, and there was also some things if one or the other of Tua or Jaylen was off the field, the defensive coordinator could play the chances of it being more of a run or a pass. So this it gets into it's common sense. It's the Mike Gesicki theory from 2 years ago, right? If Mike Gesicki's on the field, you have an 80% incident rate of passing the football. And you try to be aware of the tendency, but it's just a matter of putting the player in his best position to be successful. And for Miami, I think with what this team has done with a lot of their motions and with Tyreek and Jaylen and the vertical elements that they bring to the game, the first 2 years, there was a lot of snap rotation and not shared. Like, obviously, all your money downs, they're on the field together, but there were a lot of incidents from a snap volume perspective with where those guys were rotating amidst the other wide receivers because you're looking to keep them fresh to do a lot of the core principles that you're trying to bring to the table from a vertical passing game perspective. I think you can look from a snap percentage in 2023, and I think that this affirms this. And I understand that both guys got banged up and missed a little bit of time, but Tyreek Hill played 63% of your offensive snaps last year. Jaylen Waddle played 55. Neither one of those guys surpassed 700 snaps taken on the season. And you go to the year before that in 2022, from a snaps taken perspective, Tyreek Hill played 800 snaps and Jaylen Waddle played 785 snaps. Those guys were both around 75%. You fast forward to this season and that snap count percentage, Tyreek Hill's at 79% and Jaylen Waddle's at 79%. They're both between 428 and 432 on a snaps taken perspective thus far this season. That has a waterfall effect as far as we've observed. You see more motion within the core and less motion of Tyreek and Jaylen as the guys in motion at the snap. Some of that because the exertion that's required there. I would assume there's some economic trade-off for them being in motion and a higher exertion to run a route versus a higher volume of routes to take. But I think this is kind of the evolution of this offense and solving some of the riddles of teams have you figured out, and it's a gimmick-based offense. And it's not a gimmick-based offense. It's a Shanahan tree offense. And they all have the same core principles with different tweaks and different personnels and flavors that they choose to bring to the table with. But to have these two players snapping effectively 80% of the time, first of all, I think it's a good thing because of what you're paying those guys, right? To pay Tyreek Hill an average of $30 million a season for him to take 63% of your offensive snaps. And I know he missed a game, and I know he got banged up against Tennessee. So I know that number is realistically higher. But even if you round it up and say, okay, let's assume he doesn't miss time in those games, you're talking floating maybe breaking 70%. We're at 10% higher usage rate through the first half of the season this year. And obviously the production's not there. But it's putting your players who are making the money on the field. I think that's a win. I also think kind of embracing and leaning into kind of the Vic Fangio theory about on offense with a vanilla theory, right? And it's we don't want to give you a personnel combination unless we're trying to do something in particular or we think we can do it regardless of whether you know it or not. But keeping those guys on the field and keeping them on the field together, it does give you more predictability in what you're going to be catching in coverage. And that was something that Tua also talked about in this press conference. He was asked about how much different the two shell stuff that they're seeing. This came from Omar Kelly. And Tua said there's a lot of variations on two high coverages with what guys are trying to do into the boundary, if Tyreek's in the boundary, or what they want to do with Tyreek versus what they do with Jaylen Waddle. Maybe front side versus backside. Some teams play two-man when they're playing zone on the front side. So different ways that they get into too high against us. But knowing what the answers are and then keeping those guys on the field, you're limiting the variables to be able to anticipate what an opposing defense is going to give you based off how you line up and the call that you're going to make. Obviously, that is not a one-for-one. That is not a guarantee. But as you look at this offense individually as an individual unit trying to live up to the expectation that we had the rest of the way. And I'm being very careful with my words here because I don't want to tell me that the things I'm talking about on the show don't matter. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. As I'm not using the P word or I'm not talking about going on win streaks or anything like that. Just the offense individually as we evaluate every element of the football team. Is this a variable that as you isolate it and you keep this variable with your personnel usage with your guys that are getting 28 and 30 whatever $1 million a season, using that to create a more concrete foundation of predictability with how you're calling an offensive game should, in theory, continue to allow you to call better offensive games. And I want to see that unfold. So kind of the blessing and the curse of Tua's missed time, the curse is you really have, from a win-loss perspective, it looks like you've sunk a season, right? You're in the deep stuff now. But if that event is a catalyst for growth and it can be utilized for good, both this year and then you feel good about what the growth is this year, and then there's commitments to bring all of these primary elements back for another season or beyond, or if you want to selectively understand the theory of what you applied with Tyreek and Jaylen being on the field, and you take that theory and you apply that into the upcoming offseason or whatever it looks like, I think that can be a piece of growth, but it has to be sustained for the entirety of the second half of the season. And that's part of as we evaluate the football team, it's the things that you are interested, it's the storylines of, are you a part of the problem or are you part of the solution? Right? So that's kind of my frame of mind coming off of, I thought that was really insightful stuff from Tua as far as like personnel usage and game planning and game flow and passing offense and offensive ideology and all of that fitting in. It should not have been aha moment to say, hey, your best player's on the field more is a good thing. But how you do it and how you apply it to use it to your advantage, perhaps this is a sign of growth. But we need to collect more information to find out. Now, we have an injury on the offensive line, right tackle. We're going to get into that next here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins, so make sure that you stick with us. For most of us that like collecting cards, the idea of spending $2,000 or more on a Mahomes rookie card just isn't in the cards. No pun intended. I love collecting, but that's some serious money to drop. Thanks to slab packs from arenaclub.com, it's now possible to score gem mints for a fraction of their retail price. Every card that you mentioned and can dream of, including a Mahomes rookie card, can be found in an Arena slab pack. The Arena Club is the only repack that provides real value, a complete view of all possible cards, and a clear hit rate for each and every one. Arena Club slab packs are revolutionizing the repack game with transparency. After your pulls are revealed, they'll immediately be placed in your showroom for safekeeping, selling, trading, or auction. The Arena Club grading process is accurate, fast, and transparent, with a full grade rationale provided and an explanation of how your card was scored. Whether you're buying, selling, trading, or displaying, Arena Club is the card collecting platform that you have to check out. Right now, you can get a 10% discount off of your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/lockedonnfl and use code LOCKEDONNFL. That's arenaclub.com/LOCKEDONNFL. Code LOCKEDONNFL for 10% off of your first purchase. Guys, sometimes intimate moments happen spontaneously. We always want to be ready so we can perform in the bedroom. Hims provides access to treatments that can help you stay in the mood and perform longer, giving you the boost you need for the confidence you need when the mood strikes. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints, like Viagra and Cialis, and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for uncomfortable doctor's visits. Just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option for you. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims can help you find the ED option that works for you. Start your online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products, which are not approved by or verified for safety and effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. Okay, Austin Jackson did not practice on Thursday, the Dolphins' first practice of the week. Remember, they play on Monday, so the Wednesday practice, it's usually the Wednesday practice, is now the Thursday practice, and then you practice on Friday, and then you practice on Saturday, which would typically be your Friday practice if you're playing on a Sunday, right? Because everything's pushed back. What do you do here, right? I know, and this was a question that a lot of my core audience had asked me, if Austin Jackson's down, do you move Patrick Paul to right tackle? I would not. I think that is not a good idea. I would let Kendall Lamb play if Austin Jackson cannot go for the Dolphins. Kendall, as an experienced player, going up against a lot of young players in the Rams front, a lot of physically talented players, a lot of dynamic players. So those players will have a dynamic athleticism advantage over Kendall Lamb, but I think his experience, particularly within the structure of the Dolphins offense, gives you a more stable option than asking Patrick Paul to switch sides of the offensive line, right? And you've seen a whole bunch of teams that get a guy on the offensive line and you want to get him reps, so you just throw him out there into anything. This team did this to Liam Eichenberg, and it was to great amounts his detriment as a football player. And you're only now seeing him have any level of stability with where he's being asked to play for the first time in his career, and it's year 4. He's in a contract year. I would not want to expose Patrick Paul to that experience. I think there's great value in you're a left tackle. Learn left tackle. Learn left tackle technique. Learn left tackle footwork. Learn left tackle combinations. Learn how to identify the front from a perspective of a left tackle. Learn who you're playing next to as your left guard. Don't take everything that you've learned for the last 2 months, and now in your head, you've got to flip it and inverse all of it to go be on the other side. That just feels like a recipe for a young player, no matter how many games he played at Houston or how physically talented he is. This was the kind of reason why you brought Kendall Lamb back, to be a swing utility tackle. He has a ton of experience in doing it. So that, for me, is a much safer play, especially against a front that has a lot of youth, where maybe you don't have the athleticism advantage, but you should have the fundamentals and the technique advantage as the experienced player who's been around the block and seen all this and done all this. What is the potential impact? And this isn't to say that Austin Jackson doesn't play. He very well may end up. I'm recording this at about 10 a.m. on Friday. Maybe he's a limited participant today in practice. Maybe then he's a full participant on Saturday's practice, and it's a non-issue when he plays. And if that's the case, great. And I hope that is the case, because Austin, I thought, played a nice game on Sunday against the Bills. Ton of movement, point of attack. It kicked Austin Johnson's butt on plenty of occasions, right? So maybe that's the case. But if it's not the case, I don't think you'd feel a big difference from a pass pro standpoint. I do think Kendall Lamb might actually have like a little bit of a higher floor as a pass protector in a vacuum than what Austin Jackson does. But Austin has this explosiveness off the ball and pure unbridled power in combinations and at the point of attack and in the vertical run game that you just don't get with Kendall Lamb. So I think where you would feel it the most would probably be in the run game. Now, as you get ready for this football game, the question the Dolphins are going to have to ask themselves is, how do you achieve balance? Do we just play the tight end on that side more and ask Teron to be more on the backside and play weak side? And if we're going to run weak side zone, ask Teron Armstead to win it. Is Julian Hill back this week? Because I think that gives you maybe some more as you decide what kinds of combinations you want to play at the point of attack. If you have a lesser tackle, but you get Julian back who has more power to create movement from the tight end position, maybe you can offset some of the losses. Like, is the combination of Austin Jackson and Durham Smythe as a point of attack combo going to create more movement or less movement than the combination of Kendall Lamb and Julian Hill? Because Julian Hill definitively creates more movement at the point of attack than what Durham Smythe does, but Austin Jackson creates more movement at the point of attack than what Kendall Lamb does. Like, these are all parts of that equation. But I don't think it's a matter of, oh, Austin can't go, Kendall's going to play right tackle, we're screwed in pass pro. Kendall, every single time, he has been tapped in. He has been ready on a moment's notice. He's been ready on a moment's notice where he hasn't prepped to play the game, and then he has to play on Sundays. Kendall Lamb's one of my favorite players on this football team because of that element of who he is as a football player. And that kind of sets the stage for what we're going to talk about last year, which is, as we continue to watch this football team, how do you identify players who are solutions and part of the solution as this team moves forward and tries to get this season anywhere near the expectation that they had, but then also like the long-term conversation about who's here and who's not here and what the expectation is for them. I had some observations in watching the defensive game tape against Buffalo that we haven't talked about on the show. We'll talk about them next and how it's kind of set the stage for how I'm evaluating this football team and all the players on it for the second half of 2024. That's next. Make sure you stick with us. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role, and that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn is not just another job board. Helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't exactly looking for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. You can get ready to tackle all of the NFL action this weekend with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Week 10 off to a rousing start. 35-34 Baltimore over Cincinnati. Drops the Bengals in the AFC conference standings. I know Jets fans are all excited about it because the Bengals are now 4-6. And they were a team that was maybe knocking on the door, climbing back up into a playoff spot this weekend. And it's going to be a wild race, but you can follow along and take care of all of your opportunities to get in on the action and play your gut over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets. If you win, the FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. When you get that hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view the live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page as where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets with your first $5 bet win. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So as I evaluate players, and I do this for the draft space, and I did this for the Dolphins roster this offseason to try to grade and quantify the values of the players and how well I thought they fit the scheme, where there were questions, where the roster got better, where the roster got worse, all that kind of stuff. So you can take a traits-based evaluation and apply it to the NFL and equally apply it to college scouting to try to quantify value of players, right? But as I'm watching this game against Buffalo, particularly defensively, as I'm finishing the defensive grades, and they graded awful on defense. They had 4 players out of 20 defensive players that took at least one snap of the game. They had 4 players that graded above expectation for the 60-minute performance. It was not good, if we're being honest. And I know you're down horses, right? Like you're down your starting nickel, you're down Bradley Chubb, you're down Jalen Phillips, you're on the guys that should have been rotation guys in your edge room are starting for you, and you're down Zach Sealer. Like, I get it. It's not an excuse, right? Like the performance could have and should have been better based on the talent that was available in the game. It's not making excuses, but it is an acknowledgement of the conditions that exist when you evaluate the team. And as a reminder, this remainder of season for us here on this show is all about evaluating all of the elements of the football team for better and for worse. And when things are good, we're going to talk about the things are good and why they were good and why they worked and why it's important that they were good. Just like when things are bad, we're going to talk about why they were bad, why it's important that they were bad, and whether or not it's sustainable or it can get better and you feel like it can be a long-term solution for you or not. Right. And that's the whole objective of everything that we're committing our time to here on the show. I'm not sitting here and telling you this team's going to run back and make the playoffs and all this, that, the other thing. And I'm not worried about it. A lot of Dolphins fans believe they're going to make a run. A lot of Dolphins fans think the season's over. It's a sunk season and everything right now is a waste of time. And you just need to lose all your games so you can blow the whole thing up and go from there. You have a right to feel however you want to feel. Right. But please don't tell me the evaluation process of what's going on is wasted breath. Because that's what I do. It's the only thing I can do. Right? As somebody who makes their living covering the team and the team's not performing and everybody shows it. Right. So as I'm watching this game against Buffalo, what stood out to me defensively was the lack of the players who are playing on the defensive front, like Brandon Peely and Neil Farrell. Like these are not NFL caliber players. They're getting their teeth kicked in on double teams repeatedly. And then I'm watching for the second straight week, you get free runs off the edge. And the guys who are getting some of the free runs, Jalen Ramsey is a different story. And Kyler Murray made a great play on that break of contain when Ramsey came screaming in free against Arizona. You generally don't have enough dynamic athletes. I'm thinking about like Emmanuel Ogbah and Tyus Bowser on the edge. I'm watching Jordan Poyer in zone coverage try and flash and react as a crosser. That's a late developing crosser is working into his area, and he's trying to accelerate and match that target. And the guy they just don't have dynamic athleticism defensively. Now there's some guys that do. I think Jordan Brooks, particularly when healthy, does. Jalen Ramsey certainly does. I think Cam Smith actually has quite a bit of dynamic athleticism. Javon Holland does, but he's not out there for you. So it was really jarring to kind of see like lack of dynamic athleticism. Chop Robinson has it, but that gets into part of the evaluation process is like, it's great that Chop has that, but Chop's a developmental talent from how he played one of his best games of the season against Buffalo on Sunday. Credit where credit's due. I've been pretty tough on Chop the last 2 weeks prior to that because I don't think he's played to his potential and opportunity to impact the game. And the Dolphins need him to do it. I thought he played a good game against Buffalo. Thought he played a really solid game against Buffalo from top to bottom. But his opportunities were limited because he is a developmental player who's not ready to handle everything. So you have guys that are getting out physical when they're the big guys that are up front. You have on the edge and in space kind of this underwhelming lack of dynamic athleticism. And all of this is compounded by guys that are depth pieces for you that were supposed to be depth pieces that are playing in bigger roles. But it gets into the bigger picture of like asset allocation. And we talked about that the other week. And like, so there's like lots of pieces that go into this. So please don't take away all of this and say, fire Chris Greer, or please don't take away all of this and say, cut Jordan Poyer. Like there's layers on top of layers on top of layers. And I'm not trying to isolate a single outcome here. But what I am saying is, as I'm watching this team moving forward, I am looking for bullies. It's a box that I'm looking to check, and I'm going to put it next to every player on the roster in addition to the grade by grade or the play-by-play grades that I give for every player that's on the field for every snap for the Dolphins. I want to see bullies. I want to identify guys that can be goons and tone setters and maulers and play physical in a phone booth with you and dictate terms to you. It's an element I'm looking for. And then I'm also looking for dynamic athleticism, and it's a box. So in addition to bullies and physicality, I'm looking for who shows dynamic athleticism week in and week out. And I'm looking for football intelligence and situational awareness. And I'm looking for unselfish football players, right? And not letting off the gas on a quarterback scramble or an extended play, or not running underneath of a block to try to make a tackle for loss and giving up the edge, or corners that get down and support in the run game when really you're out there to kind of hunt balls and try and create turnovers, or guys that are going to set picks for their teammates with their twist games up front. Like unselfishness, football intelligence and situational awareness, dynamic athleticism, and physicality, right? Like how many times you watch Ray Davis and Khalil Shakir run through 3 tackle attempts to get an extra 3 yards on Sunday? I'm putting the box next to everybody's name. And I want to know who's checking what boxes. And if you don't check any of those boxes for the back half of the season, then what are we doing here? And there's guys off the top of my head that I could name that I know in the first half of the season, and it's not just like practice squad guys that get elevated to play, like Neil Farrell, right? Like, and I don't want to throw Neil Farrell in the bus. He's a practice squad player for a reason. There are guys that are on the 53 roster that I don't think have checked any of those boxes in the first half of the season. And if you get to the end of the season and I'm not confidently checking any of those boxes, then from my perspective, as somebody who's evaluating the team and figuring out solutions and problems, you're going to go in the problems bucket. And I would hope the team would feel the same way, and I hope the team would act accordingly with those players. And I don't expect everybody to check all the boxes. The guys who check all of those boxes, who are bullies with supreme physicality, but also dynamic athletes with high-level football IQ and situational awareness, and also unselfish players, those are the cream de la creme, the cream will rise to the top, right? The Macho Man Randy Savage. Like those guys are the elite of the elites, the cornerstone players. I want to know how many of those boxes you check. And there's going to be a pecking order. Because I think that, particularly on defense, I'll tell you, you got a guy on that roster who does all of those things. It's Jalen Ramsey, who's been playing, and he's been playing like it. But I want to know how many of those boxes, as I'm evaluating, and I hope you guys look at this team through the same lens on the back half of the season, because I think those are important non-individual position trait elements, but more just like, what kind of brand of football do you want to have? What kind of brand of football team do you want to be? So I hope that gives you something else to watch on Monday when the Dolphins play the Rams. We will recap the game. We'll preview the game. We got a Monday show before the game kicks off on Monday Night Football, so come back and see us on Monday. Enjoy all of the football that awaits you this weekend. I am Kyle Krabs, host of Locked On Dolphins, and I am out of here.